Hey, welcome to the channel. My name is Jason, and here I talk about all things story. And the story I'm talking about today is one of my own. We have hit episode 49 of my series, Worth 1,000 Words, where I write a 1,000 word short story based on a piece of artwork. Before I move on, I have two announcements. One, I keep telling myself I need to make and seem to never do. It's not really an announcement, it is a suggestion. So, as you know, or may not know, I have done a couple of these stories with artwork that has been suggested by viewers. So if you have a piece of artwork out there that you'd like to see a story written to my take on it, please submit it in the comments. I love doing this, and I will continue to mention this at the beginning because I don't think many people make it to the end of the video. All right, the real announcement, the second thing I wanted to talk about. Friend of the channel, friend of mine, he's a very talented writer and game designer. His name is Sursa Victory, and he has a new book out. It's called Tomb of the Everstar Sisterhood. It is a choose your own adventure. If you remember those, if you're old like me and remember those books and having a blast with them, I highly suggest you check this one out. I'll put a link in the description below, but it is geared for individuals between the ages of 8 and 12. However, if I know anything about him, I'm sure anyone's going to enjoy it. If I had the copy here myself, I would show it. When I do get it, I have ordered a few copies. I will show you on the stream and perhaps, maybe perhaps, review it. We shall see. All right, now let's move on to the music, the soundtrack of today's story. So I needed something specific, and one thing came to mind, and it's an artist I haven't revisited in a long time, and that is Helios. And I remember I was on vacation years ago, actually riding out on a patio at night, and I was listening to this album over and over and over again, and it felt like a perfect fit from what I remember. And sure enough, when I did listen to it, it was. So that album is called Moiety, and it's by Helios, as I said. So go check them out. Listen to it while I read the story to you, or maybe if you want to read it on your own on my website, and I think you'll see why I chose it. So now let us check out this week's artwork. This week's artwork is titled Junkyard, and it is by an artist out of Moscow, Russia named Nokse Mojo. You can immediately see how different this one is than most of the ones I do. There's not any inherent drama, there's not any darkness, there's not any blood, there's not anything bleak. So why did I choose this? Well, you know, this exercise of mine, this experiment of mine is not just about writing things that are sort of in my comfort zone. And so I have chosen a few images here and there, bookmarked them, because I like just the story implications of them and the fact that they're different. They're something that I'm not used to working with. So that is why I chose this one. So let's take a closer look. So we have a girl in a junkyard sitting on a very tall stack of cars, sipping a drink. There's seagulls in the sky, big fluffy clouds, and she's looking off into the distance. I love this one because it's almost as if she's on a break or something, or she's just really contemplative, looking off. But anytime I see images like these, it always makes me wonder, what is she thinking about? Like, what is her life like? What is she doing here? Why is she working in a junkyard? And it's always interesting to me, or at least I like to try to get better at crafting stories like this, where it's not fantasy, it's not sci-fi, it's not horror. There's nothing terrible that's going to happen. Now, clearly something terrible could happen, but I think that kind of approach would really fall flat with a piece of art like this. I don't believe that was the intention of the artist, and that is not going to be my intention with the story. So if you're looking for a tale where she's up there having a drink, falls over, and then the cars smash her to blood and bits, then you will be sorely disappointed. So Nokse, thanks for the artwork. Thanks for doing something that's a little bit unexpected, a little bit different in the sea of fantasy, sci-fi, blood and guts. And let's see what I came up with. Angie watched the sky because she couldn't see the ocean. Flat on her back, hair tucked into her sweaty cap to cool her neck as much as to keep it out of the dirt. She drank in the procession of clouds traveling across the otherwise stark sky. The gulls weren't here yet, but she heard them. She wished she could see them. Do my eyes deceive me, or are you actually lying down on the job, Angela? It was Bert, who looked exactly like a guy named Bert would look. She smelled the extra pickles he'd ordered on his triple stack, hanging in the air longer than his words. 5 minutes left on my break, she said. Your ma shouldn't have left the A off the end of your name because your head's always up in the clouds. You better be served bluffing the boys out of their bonus checks. We always keep a spot open for you. Jake smells worse than Paul, and Paul smells worse than... It was unfair to keep going, Bert having given her a job when no one else had. And he'd gotten enough grief from his wife, who had given him a swarm of girls, some of whom probably weren't his. His wife's reputation was known by everyone but him. You, Bert said with the broken clock of comedic timing. Angie gave him a pity chuckle and thereby a pity tit jiggle. She sat up, shook out her hair, and didn't open her eyes until the blood flowed back into her face, keeping the fat brushstrokes of clouds in her mind's eye. Tell you what, Bert said. You get the 8 we just got in done by 5, and I'll give you an extra 15, too. He waved his hands, crazy-like, around his head. Daydream, or whatever the hell it is you do. He gave her the smile of a father, one she remembered from years ago, her first and last memory of her own father, the corners of his mouth rising thoughtfully, as if proud, the creases going dark from 2-day-old stubble. All right, Bert said. Twist my arm, 20, but... He wagged his finger over his shoulder as he walked back to the office. If I catch you lying down out there, break or not, there'll be... He slapped the final half-thought out of the air before disappearing into his cave. Angie went to work. She was pretty good with the crane. All the boys lined up outside to admire her, pretending to do work, proving that fact. It wasn't long before Bert shooed them off like gulls, but she'd given them the satisfaction of stacking the 8 cars higher than they thought possible, indicated by their slack jaws. She even made one in the stack upside down as a cherry on top. She would have done more, but it was 15 minutes till her deadline, so one would have to do. 8 was a good number. Space efficient, yet short enough to remain sturdy. She returned the crane to its nook because she didn't want to leave any loose ends that might make Bert retract his offer. A wave of gulls coasted over the jagged horizon of junk, only to scatter, not at all keeping to the boundaries of the sky rivers. The base of her skull nearly touching her spine, Angie decided that there were more similarities to the sky and the earth than differences. It was just a matter of context, of timing. Time's up, Bert called in the exaggerated voice of an umpire. Dad liked baseball too, she remembered. Lean back any farther and you'll be liable to end up on the ground again. And I believe we already covered that topic. Bert held a styrofoam cup with a red bendy straw, half the paper sleeve still on it. Bought this for Janie, but she decided she doesn't like strawberry tea anymore. And well, I thought you might. He offered it to her. Angie hated strawberries and anything strawberry flavored. I do, she said. Thanks, Bert. Why a man with so many daughters who thought the world of him, his or not, needed more appreciation was beyond her. But she was happy to oblige, especially when she saw the look in his eyes, which weren't checking out her breasts, and they could have, her coveralls being a little too snug, and one too many buttons undone due to the heat of the crane's cab. She regretted the mental tit-jiggle accusation from earlier, slipped the paper off the straw, and took a sip, doing her best to keep a straight face through the flood of over-sweetened tea. Think of that as a bonus, then, he said, expecting a laugh from her. She conjured a good enough one, then decided another sip was easier to handle. Go on, then, he said. You earned it. She climbed her car tower without losing the drink. Jesus! Bert called from below. She thought about saying something about angels, but figured she'd leave the bad jokes to him. And she didn't need a nickname, and he loved giving nicknames. It's fine, she said. Look. And she rocked left and right, back and forth, to prove it was sturdy. Bert gave her a "you're crazy but all right" shake of his head, then another one of those fatherly smiles that strangely made her heart hurt. But she realized it was more from the view. The ocean, unobstructed and calm, but for a few white caps and bobbing gulls. Why they weren't soaring in the boundless sky with their brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, was beyond her. She took another sip. It didn't taste so bad. Along with the view of the water, the kiss of the breeze, a chunk of crushed ice added the texture she needed to recall what was, she was happy to find, another piece of Dad that needed less than the 20 minutes she had to assemble. She used the other 19 to savor it. The first thing that came to mind to me was naming this girl. I had this image in my head of her boss saying she's always got her head in the clouds, because she does look like she does literally have her head in the clouds. She's thinking about something, and there are massive clouds, and so that's why I called her Angie. I immediately started with the idea that he would make a joke about her being an angel, and so that is where I started. So I did not start her on her seat in these cars. I started her doing something kind of strange on her break. She's lying on her back, flat on the dirt, looking up at the clouds go by. And you could see that, with the very first line, I already seeded the fact that she wanted to see the ocean. But because she couldn't see it yet, she was just looking up at the sky. And so now that you've heard the story, you do know that the solution to that was sort of stacking these cars and getting her into that location to where she could fulfill the first line's desire. And here we are with Bert. Do my eyes deceive me, or are you actually lying down on the job, Angela? I almost wanted to make a joke about, and I've thought about this in real life when people call themselves Bert, right? So their name is Robert, and why would you choose the ugliest version of that name as Bert? It's just kind of strange to me. So that was kind of rolling around in my head, but I decided to not go there, because I think that it would have changed her personality somewhat. Not that it had been a bad thing, but I wanted to keep the strange observations, or not necessarily strange observations, but the observations in general coming from her boss's direction. And so I'm doing a little bit of world building here in the dialogue, with the fact that she's the only girl that works here, doing a quote unquote man's job. And so on their breaks, the rest of the guys, they play cards that I've established. And with that final line of, we always keep a spot open for you, it's kind of just his, it's an invitation for him. He'd rather her join the rest of them, but she's kind of a lone wolf. She's maybe a little bit introverted, possibly, or just at least rather be alone. And at this moment, I was trying to develop the kind of person Bert was going to be. I imagined him to be like a fatherly guy. He can't help himself. He has a lot of daughters, which I established later. And so he sees this girl as kind of not like his daughter, but it's hard for him not to treat her as such, with that kind of care anyway. And so just within a couple sentences, I've already established that she almost tried to make a joke about Jake smells worse than Paul, and Paul smells worse than, she was going to say, you. But she held back because she got that image of his wife and all of his daughters, and the fact that maybe that these, not all these girls were his, but he still loved them anyway. But Bert finished it, shooting it back at her, but with the broken clock of comedic timing. And this is one of those situations, and I've brought this up before, where I'm not sure if the reader's going to miss that, because there's not a massive paragraph, but there's a few sentences that are sort of going off on a tangent before that thought is finished in dialogue. I don't know. I think maybe in audio, maybe it doesn't come through as well, but maybe written, I think it does. And the fact that I'm talking about him being slow comedically, hopefully that's another hint. Here's another strange thing that happens. I had her, giving him a pity chuckle, because again, she doesn't really think he's funny, but she feels bad for him, and so she does that. And then I don't know, I just pictured her, she's laughing, and so her boobs are jiggling, and then that was just another sort of out of pity, which was also out of pity. But we find out later that he doesn't think of her at all like that, despite the fact that would seem to be the way all men would look at her in this kind of situation. He doesn't at all. And here's where they strike a deal, because I need to decide okay, why is she sitting on this stack of cars? And I changed it to 8, obviously, for the number. But I think 4 could have worked. Maybe there's already 4 stacked, and she stacks 4 more. He just decides, hey, I'll give you another break, or a longer break, if you get this job done. As kind of a challenge. And this is the first moment where I mentioned that he gave her the smile of a father, one she remembered from years ago, from her first and last memory of her own father. And I believe that aspect is the only kind of flaw in the story is that I bring up later that her dad, or she remembers her dad likes baseball, and so that would, for a continuity perspective, I feel like I need to fix that. And here he goes, just like all dads. I'm a dad. I'm a sucker. I know my daughter will never listen to this, so I can say it out loud. He gives in. Nothing's even happening. She's just kind of not talking, and he says, all right, twist my arm 20." Meaning, like, she wasn't even doing anything but looking at him, and this all happened in the span of a few seconds. And so this is the part where she's, starting work, getting into the crane, moving these cars into position. And again, I established that, all the guys who work here are out there. Not, they find her attractive and they in that way, but they also admire her work ethic and her talent, because that is, what I established here, that they're all pretty amazed at her ability to stack cars. Now, I've never worked in a junkyard. I've never worked around a junkyard. So this stack of cars may or may not be impressive. I decided it was an impressive feat. That could be completely false, but I think that for the sake of the story, that is what it's going to be. And you can see Bert running out here. He's shooting them off in all directions. Get back to work, get back to work. Now I'm essentially painting the picture, or at least part of the picture. I noticed one of the cars were upside down, so I needed to establish that fact as just kind of a strange feat of dexterity, maybe crane dexterity. I have no idea, but that's what I did. And here I am. I'm hitting the halfway point, and so she's wrapping it up. I'm starting to get her to her position, and really, there's not many stakes in this story. I mean, the only stakes are the fact that if she doesn't get this done, she's not going to get another break. But who knows? I mean, Bert seems to be a sucker for her, and he probably would have done it anyway, even if she would have failed. And I don't know. I think that's just another angle the story could have gone. So I counted the cars. That's why I went with 8. It's space efficient yet short enough to remain sturdy, because I had established that because she's sitting on top. So I didn't want it to be anything dangerous, because that's where I was taking the story. And finally, I'm bringing the gulls back. So I mentioned earlier there were no seagulls. She couldn't see them, but she could hear them, and now she can. Perhaps they were stirred up by the sound of the crane and the crunching of the cars, but now I'm putting them in the sky as you see it in this painting here. And she's staring up at them, the base of her skull nearly touching her spine. And I did a little. I love doing this kind of stuff, and I don't know if I do it too often or if it's not apparent, but it reminds me a lot of editing and film. So at the end of the sentence, it was just a matter of context, of timing, and then here comes Bert saying "time's up." I see that a lot in film. It's a nice way to sort of tie things together without them feeling completely separate. It makes it feel like there's an intent there. There's sort of a flow. And so I'm just taking her interior thought and tying that to the dialogue. And again, hopefully that's subtle enough to where it does feel like this nice, consistent pace, but it's not too obvious and played out. And so he's chastising her a little bit, jokingly, lean back any farther and you're liable to end up on the ground again. And I believe we already covered that topic. And here we are, introducing the styrofoam cup with a bendy straw, half paper sleeve still on it, indicating it has yet to be drank. And then I said that, maybe his daughter stopped by the office to say hi, or maybe he's getting picked up. Who knows? But he got it for her, and she decided she doesn't like it anymore. And if you have kids, you'll understand that they change their mind quite a bit throughout their age. And us as parents, we tend to hang on to old habits, and I have to always check myself a lot to make sure I understand that kids change quite a bit. I think I do a pretty good job, but it's funny, my parents, or a lot of people I know, don't seem to pay much attention to their own experiences and change of taste to their kids. Anyway, that's a random aside, but I like this moment here. I really like the fact that I just state plainly Angie hated strawberries and anything strawberry flavored, but in contrast to that, she says, "I do, thanks, Bert." So she thanks him, takes it. She can see what he's doing, right? She's not stupid. She understands. He's kind of in his own way, he's kind of a tragic guy, right? He's got all these kids. He's got a wife that hates him, that kind of cheats on him all the time. And so she chooses to, give him this moment, I think. Again, I always established too I established again here that he was looking at her eyes, not checking her out when he could have. And then she all of a sudden feels terrible for the fact that, or not terrible, but she feels bad that she, lumped him in with the rest of the boys earlier about, her tit jiggle. And he's trying again, kind of jokey dad jokes. Doesn't work. And, he says, all right, go on then. And she climbs it. That's what I had to think about. I'm like, well, how am I going to explain her climbing this stack of cars without losing that drink? And I just simply said, she climbed it without losing the drink. Without getting into specifics, I think that's okay. But immediately I was thinking, okay, I need to come up with a clever way to make her hold this drink while ascending this precarious tower. And Bert immediately notices, Jesus. And this is when I go back, I bring the angel thing back. She thought about saying something about angels, but figured she'd leave the bad jokes to him. And she just immediately saw where, if she vocalized that, where that might lead, and that would lead to a nickname she did not want. And she proves it's sturdy. So now I'm definitely, I'm almost 950. So really got to wrap it up and figure out, like, okay, what is she looking at? What is she thinking about? And I think it's obvious to you by now. It's obvious to me while I was writing it, because I did establish the fact that she lost her father when she was very young, and so maybe she was thinking about him. And what I decided to do is allow this view to have her find or to locate another memory of her dad. And I was just going to leave it at that. And I like the idea where at the very end she had some, she had a time limit to think about it. And luckily it didn't take her long to recall this moment. And she used the rest of it to savor it, the rest of her break. I thought that was a fitting ending because there was always a time constraint, I believe, in the story. And when you see images, at least when I do, or hear music or something, like sometimes just things come into your head that come out of nowhere. You haven't thought about something in many years, and it just hits you. And so that's what I went with. And I also didn't want to get specific with the memory itself. I thought about it. I really did quite a bit. Like, okay, well, what's this final memory going to be? And I decided to just stay away from that, partially because of the word count, right? See, I'm already at 1,000 words, and I believe I go to like 40 over, maybe 50 over, something like that. And so I think if it weren't for this word constraint, I probably would have been more specific about what the memory was. But I kind of like this better, and I think this is another example of how constraints can sometimes, make the story better, make whatever it is you're doing better, because you just really sometimes there's more power in what's unsaid than what's said. And because I went over quite a bit, I shouldn't say quite a bit, I've gone over more than this before, but the editing took a little bit longer. I think I ended at about an hour 20, something like that. The heart of the story was here. It was just a matter of me reading it more carefully to get the word count down. And that was kind of a kill your darling moment. I really liked the idea where, they all went out for burgers or something, and she kept her bun because she wanted to feed it to the seagulls. I never revisited that. I think if I would have created the scene to where she was feeding the seagulls, I probably would have left it in there, but I never revisited it. So I had to kill that one, unfortunately. I really like that character moment. Essentially, she ate just the patty of her burger and the vegetables or whatever else it was, but left the bun because the seagulls, she loved feeding the seagulls. And I think moments like that, when you're writing character, at least I find, and it's funny, I never ever think about that stuff when I'm trying to create a character. It's always while I'm drafting. Those are the little micro details that say more than you might think, and they help craft the person you're creating over the course of the story. And sometimes they may turn out different than you thought. I think a lot of times we head into stories and we're like, okay, this person is this is his drive, this is or her drive, this is their motivation, this is what they like, this is what they don't like. And then it's funny, you put them in a situation, and I mean, I can only imagine it's just the fact that, as we tell these stories, they kind of mold into something else. And while I think it's incredibly important to know a lot about your character before you start writing the long form stuff, and I'm not talking about things they like and they don't like, but just temperament, personality quirk, things like that, things that make them them. All these little details, I think those are the things that happen while you're writing, at least for me. And so I found a lot of time, honestly, that sometimes the character will change. And then so you have to be careful for consistency and make sure, because that's one of the major flaws of any form of storytelling is characters not doing things that they wouldn't do. So our characters doing things that they normally wouldn't do. It's sort of like we put on the brakes immediately as viewers or readers. And I noticed a huge one. This is kind of an off tangent in The Mandalorian multiple times. And despite the love for many people out for that show, I felt the writing was very weak due to things like that. Anyway, just something to look out for. Just make sure your characters are consistent. That's what I always try to do. Make them also, in moments of mental distress, make them do things they wouldn't normally do. Maybe it's what's really lurking inside them. And I'm going on too long. We've hit 1,000 words. I think I'm happy. I think I'm about done. And it looks as if that is the case. Welcome to the end, dear viewer. I am so glad you made it. This is the final thoughts section where I talk about my final thoughts. Big surprise. What I liked, what I didn't like, anything I may have learned. So let's talk about this one. So this was a pleasant surprise for me. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to create something compelling based on this simple image, but for whatever reason, like I like to write things that are very internal. I love character-driven pieces. I believe character is king in all storytelling, no matter how cool the plot may be. And so I always find myself drawn to things like this, or exercises like this, or even in my own long-form stuff. Sometimes I get a little bit too in the weeds, I think, with the internal stuff. So I have to always pull back. But I think in a short story form like this, this is a great way to explore characterization, and that is what I did. So I created a couple of individuals, the woman you see in the art itself, and then her boss, Mr. Burt. And then, there was a few other guys in there that were just sort of background characters, but for some reason, I just decided there needed to be some kind of conversation, some kind of dynamic to establish the world, to do a little bit of world building in terms of who these characters were, what their relationships were, why she was in this junkyard, because I think that's one of the most interesting things. Now, if you listen to the writing analysis, I am no junkyard expert, so maybe it is an industry rampant with women employees that I'm just completely unaware of. But in writing this story, I felt like it was an anomaly. But I thought that was an interesting avenue to explore, like why this young girl was working in a junkyard. Was it family business or an uncle, or was she just doing summer work? Like what was it? And that took me down the path of a girl who had lost her father at a very young age, but these very brief memories of him were still rolling around in her head. And I don't know, maybe she got this job because of the proximity to where, I don't know, these memories were triggered. I don't know. But anyway, but let's just say it was a nice departure from what I normally do. Yeah, there was some sadness there, I think, at least maybe not in the present, but present in her head. There was no deaths. There was no terrible things that happened, but I don't feel like I ever gave her a reason to be there. And that was one of the things I tried to set out to do. So if we're going to talk about the things that I didn't like, or I shouldn't say didn't like, but maybe could have been better, is that I think it would have been interesting to establish why she was there. Maybe because, in looking at this image, to me, that's exactly what I thought. Like, oh, this seems a little bit off. This is weird. But maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it's beyond that. Maybe the glimpses into her past were enough to put you as a reader on the right road to explain that question. Maybe I could have done something a little more pivotal with a stack of cars, but again, like I said in the last episode, I shouldn't beat myself up for not coming up with something that's mind-blowing. This is a moment. This is a vignette in this character's life, and it's not their entire story. And while I do try to create something as powerful as I can in very few words, sometimes it doesn't always happen. Sometimes it doesn't always need to be grand. But here I am talking myself out of it. What did I like? I like the fact that I like the world building, honestly. I like the banter between the two characters. I enjoyed that because I did a little bit of world building to let you know, or at least character development to let you know that this guy Bert, he had a good life, but also there was some not so good stuff there, right? With his wife and maybe some of these daughters, weren't even his, but he loved them all the same. And Angie, she recognized that. She knew him personally, at least personally enough to not fight back with him, not jab him back, because he was saying things essentially out of love. And so she swallowed her pride along with swallowing some strawberry tea she really didn't like, but it was all for him. So there was, I think, some nice closure or understanding or just dynamic development between these two, and I enjoyed that. And I think the last thing I liked is utilizing the time. So she had only a certain amount of time for her break, and she used those last moments that she earned from doing this feat of stacking these cars, I guess, to remember her father. And I mentioned this in the writing analysis too, but I was really trying to think about what that memory was going to be. I was trying to make that image really resonate. And what did I do? I didn't even give you an image. I left it up to you because honestly, I was running out of words. I was already over, but I was actually happy about it because, you know, as I said also in the writing analysis, what goes unsaid can sometimes be far more powerful than what is said. And so I will leave you with that. And don't forget, if you have a piece of artwork you would like me to write a story to, please submit it to me in the comments. Talk to me on stream. Drop it on the stream. I stream on Saturdays and Sundays, usually around 5 p.m., 6 p.m. Pacific time. And if you'd like to support the channel, give me a like if you like the video, and subscribe if you like story-related content. Share this video with an author friend of yours or someone who loves fiction and likes to kind of peek behind the curtain and understand the thought process of someone who is just coming up with something on the spot. Join me on my live streams, which I already talked about. All of this is in the description below. Also, please go check out Search for Victory's new book. The link will be down below as well. I'm excited to read it. And on that note, keep reading, keep writing, and I will see you next week. Thanks. Bye. If you'd like to read the story in its non-video format, check the link in the description. I didn't edit anything else, promise. Thanks again.